Thank you for that, Sonia. That was wonderful. And Hari Om and welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today to chat about the wisdom of women saints. My name is Neetu. I am a chick and I live in Boston, and I am part of the Devi group. Before we begin, I would like to share that there will be a Q&A session at the end of this program, so please be sure to send me all of your questions. I will begin with an opening prayer and a Saraswati mantra, so please join me. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Thank you. This mantra translates to salutations to Devi Saraswati, who is the giver of boons and fulfiller of wishes. O Devi, when I begin my studies, please bestow on me the capacity of right understanding always. Om Shanti. Thank you all again. I will now hand it over to Brahmacharini Shubhani ji, Chinmaya Mission New York, to get us started.
Ya kundendu tushara dhavala, ya shupravastranvita, ya veena varadanda manditakara, ya shveta padmasana, ya brahmachuta shankara prabhritibhi, devai sada pujita. Samam patu Saraswati Bhagavati Nishesha Jadhyapaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Hari Om to everyone, and very happy to have all of you here. Today, we thought that we would do a talk on the wisdom of women saints. Before I get into the particular saint that I'll be speaking about, I just wanted to speak a little bit about the topic. We chose these words because wisdom means that knowledge which has become manifest. Many times we hear Vedanta and we reflect on it, but we're not able to live it or practice it. But when we say wisdom, it means that it has been lived, or it is being lived and practiced. And particularly by who? By a saint. A saint is one who manifests God. A saint is one who is living God or goddess. And why did we pick a woman? We know that we're beyond the body, the mind, the intellect. We all know that we are Atman, and Atman doesn't have a name or form. But sometimes when we're on this journey of seeking, we need to feel connected to someone or something. We need to feel or see someone who has walked this path truly, someone who's like us. So sometimes it can be very helpful when we see someone of the same gender or the same culture or religion or even background, or someone who even speaks the same language. Sometimes that can be very helpful to a person. And hence, today being Shakti Divas, we chose this topic, wisdom of women saints, so that we can just revel in the wisdom that they exuded in their lives and just by being. And the purpose of this is threefold. One is to create an awareness of women saints in our tradition who have walked fearlessly in the path of enlightenment. The second is to really reflect on their lives and teachings and see what we can draw from them. And the third is to slowly be able to transform. Just by hearing the words of a saint or seeing how they live, one can get so inspired that they actually start to transform. As what is said in Bhaja Govindam, Satsangate Nisangatva. We never know what's going to hit us, when it's going to hit us. But what we do know is that when we constantly engage in satsang and keep our minds in the higher, we do start to feel a difference. It might not be right away, but there are roots growing. We might not see trees and leaves and fruits and branches, but inside, we're feeling roots. And that's what we're here to do today. Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasana. Having established that and said that, the topic that I chose to reflect upon today deeply, or the saint that I chose, is Anandamayima. Anandamayima is someone that I had not heard about and at all before last year. It just so happened that I was in an ashram and they had lots of books. And I was just browsing through the books, just trying to see what I could read. And I saw one of her books. And when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. I felt so connected to it and drawn to it. And ever since then, I've been reading her works and just enjoying to see how her life has unfolded and to see how mine can. So who is Anandamayima? So her name is Nirmala Sundari. Her name was Nirmala Sundari. She was born on April 30, 1896, in this place called Kiora, which was East Bengal, but now Bangladesh. And she was a very wonderful child. And though a little bit odd at times, her parents would see her talking to plants or having invisible friends. And sometimes she would go into these spells of being absent-minded. Clearly, she was in a trance. And she was so acute and alert to the fact that she barely went to school. She went to school only for 2 years because she grew up in a big household where she had many brothers and sisters, but there was not enough finances to go around. And so she being one of the eldest ones, had to take care of everybody. And so she could only go to school for 2 years, but yet when she did go to school, it seemed that she remembered so many things and she could just answer the questions of the teachers. And so her parents, wondered about her a little bit, but didn't think any odd thing about it. And her parents were Vaishnavas. They were very devout. Her dad loved going on pilgrimages and used to do his daily puja. And her mom was engaged in kirtana and loved to sing devotional songs. So she picked this up from her parents. And it is said that one day she went to a Shiva temple. Her relative had dropped her there, and said, I'll leave you here for some time. I'll go do some errands and come back. And so Nirmala was at the Shiva temple and she sat down, and the relative forgot about her, just forgot that she had left Nirmala at the temple. And hours later, she remembered, she went back to the temple, and lo and behold, Nirmala was sitting in the same posture that she was earlier. So she did exhibit few signs of being deeply spiritual when she was young, but nobody really thought much of it. And in those days, people got married very young. And so when she was nearly 13, she got married to this man by the name of Bolanath. But she didn't live with him just yet. So she stayed with her parents for some time, and then she stayed with his brother and sister-in-law so that she could get acquainted with the family. And she stayed there for about 5 years. And then finally, she stayed with her husband. And now when her husband was with her, Bolanath, he thought she was just an ordinary, ordinary girl. She was someone I just married. But he was shocked because their marriage was never consummated. When he tried to go near her, it was though he felt like an electric shock in his body, and he's just so confused. He said, "What happened? Who did I marry? What's going on?" And so he said, there's something about her, and he was still trying to figure it out. He didn't quite get it. But slowly and surely, he started to notice things. Like she would do some kirtanas. And all of a sudden she would just go into a deep, deep trance, and she seemed to get lost in God. And, her husband had to move to a lot of places. So in one point of time, they went to this place called Astagrama. And when they went there, they stayed there. Somebody came to visit them. And when he came to see Nirmala, he was just taken aback, and he bowed down to her and he just called her Ma. He said, "I'm calling you Ma. And someday everybody's going to call you Ma, because there's just something about you I can't even explain." And so that's what happened. And then, another one of Bolanath's friends came, and he saw her, and he said, this is Durga Ma. This is Durga Ma. And slowly people began to see her as this divine presence. Now, note, she didn't say anything about herself, and she didn't even intend for people to notice her. And her presence was so strong that people were drawn to it. So what happened then is she of course was with her husband, and he would see that there were times where she was just engaged in chanting non-stop. She would just chant. Sometimes she would spend hours, just hours, lost. One time, she was chanting the name of Bhagavan Vishnu. She's a Vaishnava. She's from a Vaishnava background. And he said, no, I'm a Shiva devotee, so you chant Shiva's name. So then she said, okay, I'll chant Shiva's name. And she started just chanting Bhagavan Shiva's name. And so she was very calm, collected, cool. She saw God in everyone. Deep in her heart, she was an Advaitin, and you can tell by her writing. But she always spoke the name of God. One time when she was bathing in a lake, she had this sort of lila, she calls it, or kayala, that she should be a sadhaka. She should play the role of a sadhaka. So one time she was just sitting down, and she got into her mind that she should initiate herself. As she was the guru, and she was the shishya, and she was the mantra. And she initiated herself into sadhana. And everybody was just baffled because her husband hadn't been initiated. So she said, "Don't worry, I will also initiate him." And so she initiated her husband. So she was the guru of her husband, but as well as the wife of her husband. And she played both roles. And so this went on. And all of a sudden, one time she was just spontaneously uttering Sanskrit chants. Now, this Nirmala, she didn't really know. She didn't really know Sanskrit. She didn't study Shastra. She didn't, because we said she went to school for just about 2 years. So it's not like she had any formal scripture study or any training, no guru whatsoever. But spontaneously, like the Sanskrit mantras just flowed through her. And everybody thought she's strange. She's strange because sometimes she would heal people, she would counsel people, and there are times where things would just come through her. And everybody kept telling Bola Nath, your wife is strange. Your wife is strange. She's not normal. And you're not having children. Don't you want a married life? And so, sometimes this got to him, but he didn't let it get to him. He just stuck to Ma. But although one time he said, okay, let's see, let's call someone. And they said, you have to call this, this person who takes away that nazar, that black magic, and call this person to heal her. And so they called someone to heal Anandamayima. And nothing happened. They called someone to heal, nothing happened. He tried to touch Anandamayima, and he himself was shocked. And so finally, the doctor came and said, listen, your wife is not mad. She's not insane. She is God intoxicated. She is intoxicated by God. And that is that. And so he understood. He understood that his wife was just divine. And that's the way it was. After she initiated her husband, she spent some time in silence. And, there were such strange things in her life wherein at some point in time, she lost the ability to hold food. She lost the ability to hold food, that people had to feed her. People had to just feed her because she couldn't hold food. And there was also a time where she was with her husband and she couldn't hold kitchen utensils anymore. She couldn't hold them anymore. So she said, I can't cook. He said, what? She said, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm not able to hold it. So he said, try. And she did. And when she cooked, they got sick. So she said, that Leela is over. It's over. And so these Leelas were in and through her life. And at another point in time, they moved to this place called Siddheshwari. And all of a sudden, she just had this vision. She said, we have to go to this place. And they went into the forest, and there was an abandoned Kali temple there. And she said, this place is very holy. And it was later found out that saints and sages like Adi Shankaracharya ji used to practice tapasya there. And so that later became the first ashrama of Anandamayima. Now, how did she get her name? So, as people got to know her more and more, many devotees came to her to learn from her simple ways. And I'll share with you a story shortly about how simple, but how profound her teachings were. So people came to her, and one man's name was Baiji, and he was a very, very close devotee of her. And one day she tells him, Baiji, leave everything. He was at work. She said, leave everything, come to Siddheshwari. And so he left everything and he went to Siddheshwari. And he said, why did you call me? She said, well, let's see. And after some time, Baiji said, from today onwards, you're going to be called Anandamayima. Anandamayima means bliss permeated mother. Everybody should call you that. And she said, well, now you know why you came here, right? You had to give me a name. And so ever since then, she's known as Ma, Anandamayima. And when you even just look at her picture, you feel that presence. You know, there are some pictures that you look at and you really feel that. You feel that when you look at her picture. One of her other devotees, his name was Didi. Didi was a young lady who came to her, who left everything, and she took her in, and she taught her also Gayatri mantra. She taught her, she taught her how to do puja and everything. So in this way, many people flocked to her. Even Nehru's wife was a great devotee of Ma. She also met with Mahatma Gandhi. She met with people of different lands, royal people, village people, foreigners, all kinds of people she met. And she just, she had no sense of that I have to become something. This was the most beautiful thing in her life. She never felt that I have to become someone or I have to be someone. She just was an instrument of God. And whichever way God played her, that's how she moved. That's how she swayed. That's how she danced. So here is a woman saint who breaks all kinds of limitations. She, first of all, she's in Grahastha. Some people feel like, in Grahastha ashrama, enlightenment is not possible, and this and that. She was in Grahastha. And second of all, being a woman, they feel like, maybe it's too difficult. So many things are there to take care of. She was a woman, and she also initiated her husband. Some people feel that women shouldn't chant Veda mantras. She chanted Gayatri mantra, and she taught it. And she chanted all kinds of mantras, and she initiated herself into it. Some people feel, that women should be restricted, especially in those days. They had the parda where women should be restricted and shouldn't be seen by men. Well, her doors were open. Everybody and anybody came to her, and all they found was love. There were some restrictions on caste at that time. Well, the temples that she was in, everybody could come. And it was so odd that, odd for some people, but when she would do Durga Puja once in a while, instead of offering the flowers to Durga Mata, she would offer it on herself. This is how she was. She was so spontaneous, so true. And as I said, she broke all kinds of limitations that people think there are on women, because we put limitations on ourselves. When you go to Chinmaya Vibhuti, I'm sure some of you have been to Chinmaya Vibhuti. And my favorite part about that is when you go inside, it says something so beautiful. It says, the sky is the limit. And then it says, you are your sky. And that's the most beautiful thing, because you are your own limitation. We shouldn't ever think that people are limiting us, and people are limiting us or preventing us from rising. It's our own mind. It's our own mind saying that you can't do it. I can't do it. It's too hard. It's too difficult. It's not possible. It's our own mind that places those limitations. When we see the life of Anandamayima, she challenged every single limitation. Why? Because she went beyond the mind. She went beyond the mind. To go beyond our own limitations, we have to go beyond our mind. And that's the secret. And her way of breaking these limitations was not in any loud, obnoxious, bragging way that, yes, I broke this, and yes, I did this. It wasn't like that. It was just by being. She just was. So she didn't have to say anything. When you looked at her, you knew that this was a woman who was divine. And this was a woman of the a God realized saint. And this was Anandamayima. Now I'll share with you a story that that's very dear to me, that she has written in one of her books. And I've shared this with some of you, but no matter how many times I speak on this story, I still am able to get something out of it. It just goes so deep. And the story goes like this. There were two painters. So there was a king. There was a king in a land. And, he wanted some frescoes to be painted on his palace walls. So he had these two palace walls and he said, I want frescoes to be painted, but I want different things. So I'm going to hire two painters and I'll see what they do. So he hired two painters. And so one painter came on this side, the other painter came on the other side, and he said, let's see what both of you come up with, different, the same, who knows, but we'll put a curtain in between so you don't know who's doing what. And you just paint. You just paint. I trust you. The king has so much trust. And so they were painting. And then finally it was time to reveal the paintings. So on this left side of the wall, when the painting was unveiled, you could see just a beautiful painting. I mean, it was like nature and greenery and trees and rivers. It was just so incredibly beautiful. And the king was taken aback and he said, wow, And then he said, okay, let's see the other side. And everyone's like, okay, what's on the other side? What's on the other side? If this side is so good, what's on the other side? And everyone's just waiting to see. And the other side is unveiled. And the other side is empty. Nothing's there. No painting. But what's there is the wall was polished. It was polished, really, really polished well. And so the king saw this side of the wall that was polished and said, wow, this painting looks so beautiful. And when it is reflected on this wall, it looks even more beautiful. And the king was so pleased. Now, what does this story say? Anandamayima was asked, who is a guru and who is a disciple? And this is the story she gives. The guru is one who paints the picture of our lives. Guru Bhagavan paints the picture of our lives in the most beautiful fashion. The Shishya or disciple is the one who just purifies their mind so that the painting of God or Guru shines through beautifully. And that's our role. The role of Guru is to just paint that picture for us. But the role of Shishya is to just purify our mind and to gain that clarity of knowledge. And from this story, it always makes me think that I have no right to what. I have no right to think of how life should be, or what will the future be, or where will I be, or what will happen. We have no right to think that. Because if I truly trust, surrender, and give myself to God, then my only right is to purify and let that painting come through. And then I think the most beautiful life can happen. And that was the depth of her teaching. That was the depth of her teaching. I'll just pause for a moment so we can take that in. Another thing that she always says is that never stop your sadhana. Never stop your sadhana. Even if there are days, times where we don't want to sit quietly. We don't want to engage in sadhana at all. There are times where our mind is just somewhere else. She says, just sit. Just sit and just commune with the divine. When we put a lot of effort, only then it becomes effortless. So that purifying the mind, that gaining clarity of knowledge, yes, it's true. It does take a lot of effort on that part. That polishing of the wall does take a lot of effort on our part. But if we're sincere and we do put effort, at some point in time, it will be effortless. At some point in time, it will be so incredibly effortless that we won't even feel our presence. We won't even feel our ego. It will just be God manifesting through us and nothing more. The question is, how do we know? How do we know that God is fully manifesting through us? The answer is, we don't anymore feel the need to become. We don't feel the need to become anything or anybody. We don't feel the need to make something of ourselves. We just surrender and let everything be. And when I read and reflect upon Anandamayi's life, Anandamayima's life, this is what I feel her message was. So I hope and I pray that all of us can be more inspired to study the lives of such great saints like Ma, from all genders, from all backgrounds, from all religions, anyone that can help us walk this path of enlightenment it will be truly an honor to study anyone who can help us walk on this path. So thank you for this opportunity, and we're so grateful today. We're also going to launch a book on women saints, and we will talk about that in a little bit. But now I'd like to pass it on to Brahmacharini Akalka ji. Namaste. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you for that, Shubhani ji. That was wonderful, so inspiring to listen to. Like Shubhani ji said, we will now be handing it over to Brahmacharini Akalka ji, Chinmaya Mission New Jersey, to introduce us to the next saint.
Hari Om. Om Santoshini Jaganmata Mama Saubhagya Vriddhaye Namaskaromi Bhaktya Tvam Prasanna Varada Bhava. Hari Om. Hari Om, everyone. I'd like to thank Shubhani ji for giving me this opportunity and coming up with such a lovely program, and to reflect on women saints on this very auspicious, apt day, International Women's Day. Shubhani ji and myself, for a few weeks, months now, have been discussing about different women saints, their contributions. And as she mentioned, we're also going to be putting together a manuscript based on lives of different saints who were women. And in the process of all of this research and discovery, one of the things that we did was start to read a little bit about them. And as most of us do, the first thing is we'll go to Wikipedia and find out what facts can I list down, And this was what I thought would be nice to add to this conversation, which is when you look on that Wikipedia, what it'll say at the beginning, we were looking at Akka Mahadevi, Andal, then Mirabai, as Shubhani ji spoke so beautifully about Anandamayima. And one thing that struck me is that they'll write, 12th century poet, as Akka Mahadevi was, 12th century poet born in Karnataka. This is what they'll put. And this is a very, very, it's a funny thing that we do as human beings. This is a very transactional way of thinking about these saints. Just like if we go to a dinner or we go to a function, first thing, if people want to get to know you, they'll ask you first, what is your name? But more importantly, they ask, what do you do? No. And that is how we learn about each other. We ask, what do you do? And it's very funny because most of the time we walk around thinking of ourselves as human doings rather than human beings. And it's very funny because when we ask, what do you do? It tells us something very interesting about our mind, which is what we do is what is valuable about us. So for these saints, when they say they were poets, that poetry, that action of poetry is given the prominence. But if we see the same story with spiritual eyes, we will see that the much more important thing is not the poetry per se, but why they expressed in poetry, why they expressed in certain ways. And for a saint or sage, they have had some divine experience. And that divine experience is so irrepressible. It cannot be contained, uncontainable, that it has to express somehow. And oftentimes it can be poetry, or it can be great debate also. It can be philosophical thought. It can be pure silence. So many ways they express. And yet at the same time, the expression is only what we can see of some kind of internal revolution, internal evolution that is invisible to the naked eye. But for us, what else do we have other than that? Our Gurudev was so funny. I remember very few times I LOL in real life. I'm told that is a very lame way of saying it. You're supposed to say laugh out loud. But very few times I will just literally laugh if I'm reading something. But this time I really laughed. Gurudev said, it is the same as if you see a man who has decided to poke something into the light socket, and he gets a terrible electrical shock. And he then starts to jump and say, ow, oh, and shout and jump, And someone else looking at him, they say, I want to have his experience. I must also shout, ow, ooh. So shouting and jumping, we think, is the sign of having had that experience. In the same way, for a saint, they have had some divine, we cannot even call it an experience, but something they have experienced. We use that word. And we look at the expressions. And what we do, we try to copy them and think we are as great. So not all of us, but sometimes this thought can come to us, oh, I am also doing it so nicely. But it is an expression of something that is invisible. And so when we see all of these beautiful expressions of devotion, beautiful expressions of thought, we should also think about what is there beyond that expression. That is what makes them a saint. That is why when we have devotion, studying, being immersed in these things, being immersed in their stories also creates some revolution in us. So one other thing to mention is that in our tradition, there are no watertight compartments to say something is good, something is bad, something is right, something is wrong. This is a very categorical way of looking at it. What we say is paradoxes can be true at one and the same time. For example, if we were to say, you cannot sit still and move at the same time. Our teacher told us this. He said, but it is true at one and the same moment. Right now, we can be sitting, not moving at all, And yet the earth is rotating. The earth is turning in space. Then the earth also is going around the sun. So at one and the same time, we can be absolutely still. We can also be moving at the same time. Or we can say, is it possible to go north and south at one and the same time? So say you're on a train. The train is going north. And yet I am walking from the front of the train to the back of the train. So at the same time, I am moving north, I'm also moving south. Two things can be true. And so it is true that in these women saints, we see these incredible things that normally our mind might see as different, but they put all of them together and express something beyond all differences. So they can be extremely soft and tender and yet stronger than iron. No, trust me, when your mom finds out you haven't done your homework, you also find out the same thing. So they can be all expressions at one and the same time. They can be both in terms of when I was studying Akka Mahadevi for this talk, she did not have formal studies. And yet she had more wisdom than all of the formal study in the world can give without the beauty of devotion to create something, to create that alchemy within. Well, all of these things can be true at one and the same time. In our saints, sages, we might see external differences in form, appearance, in expressions of gender, or all of these different things. But again, in our tradition, we don't say that anything is in watertight compartments. We say that everything is infinite, everything is divine, every form of life is divine. And therefore, there can be no contradiction, there can be no barriers, as Shubhani ji said, to that expression of oneness with that supreme. And nowhere can we see this so beautifully. And that is hyperbolic. Anywhere you read the life of a saint, you are seeing the same thing only, which is that divine self expressing in so many different names and forms. But when I was reading these vachanas are the poetic compositions. But in fact, these vachanas do not ascribe to any particular meter or strict rules of chandas, that metrical system that is most often you will see in Sanskritam. They do not follow those kind of rigid disciplines in that way. They are free-flowing poetic verses. And somewhere I saw that this word vachanam, it does not mean utterance. It means a commitment or a statement. No, vachanam, it does not mean poetry even. It has this weight connotation. So who was Akka Mahadevi? Little is known about the exact facts of her life. In fact, usually there's some debate about the exact expressions, but as we know, those things are not as important as what they hint at, what they reveal. So Akka Mahadevi was born in the 12th century, about 1130, and she was born in Karnataka. And she composed these vachanas in Kannada. And she was part of something called the Veera Shaiva movement, Bhakti movement. And the movement was really about helping people let go of their preconceptions about, okay, this is what devotion, this is what study, this is what immersion in the divine looks like. It doesn't have to follow rigid rituals. It does not have to follow rigid meters. It's not to say those are not important, but if we think those are the only thing that is important, then we've kind of lost the message. Just like the jumping in the socket, that is a perfect example. Although at that time they did not have electricity, so they could not have come up with that example. Puja Gurudev had to come and help us with that. But in the 12th century, she was born, and as a child, she was always involved in Shiva worship. And she worshipped him in this form called as Channa Mallikarjuna. Channa means beautiful. Mallika refers to that jasmine flower. And Arjuna is that white, bright, resplendent. But Channa Mallikarjuna, that form of Lord Shiva, because he's very pale in color and he is tender like that jasmine flower. So that was her beloved form of Lord Shiva. And from a young age, this was her interest. And now this is where some of the accounts diverge. But legend has that there was one king of Kaushika, King Kaushika, who came there and seeing the beauty of this young girl, he fell in love and wanted to marry her. Now, she was not inclined in that way. She was devoted to Lord Shiva. And though that was her wish, because of the coercion of the king, he was very forceful, threatened her parents also. She said, I will marry you. Some accounts say that she gives her 3 stipulations and he does not want to meet them, and therefore they don't get married. And in some, they do get married, but he breaks the stipulations. So she gives 3 stipulations. One is, I may meditate upon the Lord as I please. The second is, I may spend time with the devotees of the Lord as I please. And the third is, I may worship the Guru as I please. So in one account, the king agrees, but then when they become married, first what happens, while she is sleeping, one sage comes to visit, but he does not want to wake her, and so he lets her sleep through the visit of that sage. So when she wakes up, she says, when she finds out what has happened, one stipulation has been broken. There are 2 left. In the second one, she is there in meditation. The king feels some, amorous feeling, and he awakens her from that meditation. So she says, now, 2 of your stipulations you have lost. She refuses. And then in the third, she is sleeping and the Guru comes. And rushing out from that bedchamber without any vestments also, she goes to meet the Guru in that ecstasy to see him. The Guru says, my dear, you please, get ready and then you come. Very lovingly. So then when she went back, what happened? The king now says, at that time, the king gets angry. And she says, you've broken the third stipulation now. And when she goes to take her clothing, he says, why do you need this for? If you have so much devotion for Guru, you don't need. So she said, okay. And she left. So from that time, she was clothed only in her hair. And this is again to show that when that saint has that experience, there's no prescription we can give for how they express. All the prescriptions, meaning prescription as in what is prescribed for us in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, all the guidelines given. These things, it's like if we're sick, but our sickness happens to be the sickness of samsara. So they give certain stipulations, just like we have medicines. You take the medicine, you become well, you do not need the medicines anymore. When you are well, why do you have to take them? The reason why I tell is, we should also understand we need them, but how to see the life of this saint and understand. So she went clothed only like that, and she spent her life in the company of devotees, in the company of other saints, in debate also. There's a beautiful debate that she enters with other leading minds of that time. And she replies in these vachanas. And the vachanas have so much. If you study all Upanishads and come back to these vachanas, you will understand them. And yet, if you have not studied them at all, they still touch you. This is the magic of a saint. So I thought, in the time that we have, let us just look at maybe 1 or 2 so that we can enjoy that. Otherwise, it is like me telling you about ice cream. You must try it for yourself. Then you will enjoy it. So this one, it says, like treasure hidden by the earth, like taste hidden by the fruit, like gold hidden by the stone, like oil hidden by the sesame seed, like fire hidden by the wood. Channamallikarjuna, jasmine tender, hides as the being behind becoming. No one knows him. If we do not like him, we can say no one knows that one. This is so beautiful. And first, poems tell you as much in the spaces between the words as they do with the words. They can be enjoyed that way. And one thing about every single example she has given here is that in all of these, if you notice, the second feature, which is earth, fruit, stone, seed, wood, these are all the raw form. Through some delving, something can be taken out from within that form. So people are all looking for treasure. They have to find it in the earth. People want the taste in the fruit. You don't want the peel, so you have to take it from inside. We want the gold inside the stone. We don't want the stone. Oil, all of you, we use that nice sesame oil for the lamp, for the cooking, everything. Fire in the wood. Just like that, in each and every one of us, within the matter envelopments, meaning within this physical apparatus, there is something of value within. And to get that, some work has to be done. And what type of work? The work of bhakti, the work of devotion, the work of immersion, reflection. That is in the Upanishads, they give one example of the arani. Arani is between two wooden cups, a stick is given. When that stick is given a lot of friction, the spark lights the fire. So like that, when we churn our positive and negative thoughts and reflect on them deeply, then the spark of knowledge comes. We go beyond the two of them. So like that, that spark has to happen. And that spark is what? Within this world of becoming, Bhava means the Bhava Sagar, always becoming something. Shubhani ji mentioned the same thing. When she mentioned that, I thought, this will go perfectly with this poem. So in this becoming, there's something that never changes, that never has to become anything else, that is perfect, pristine. That one is the presence of Lord. That one is my own self. So I think we'll have time for maybe one more. We'll see. Lord, see, my mind touches you, yet doesn't reach you. My mind is troubled. Like a toll keeper at the city gates, my mind is unhappy. It cannot become empty, forgetting the two. Show me how you can become me, oh Channamallikarjuna, jasmine tender. It says, again, this is so beautiful. Mind always wants to think on its problems. We always want to think, whether it's our taxes, whether it is how kids are going to get food, or whether I'm going to study, pass my exam. Always mind has a problem, and mind wants to chip away at that problem. And interestingly, mind always thinks that the solution is in more thinking. We always think, I haven't thought enough about it. That is why at 3 a.m, you're still thinking about something that hasn't even happened. Meeting tomorrow, you're losing sleep today, which ironically makes you worse at the meeting tomorrow. But yet our mind, we say we cannot turn that mind off. This is why mind is troubled, filled with so many desires, filled with so many wishes of becoming something else, something different. And the first line, so this is the trouble of the mind. And yet what does the mind not know? Lord, see, my mind touches you. This says, in every cognition that we have, in every thought that we have, that thought is comprised of nothing other than consciousness, other than the divine touch of the Lord. And yet what happens? that is the one thing we cannot touch objectively. That is our own self. Light can shine on something else. Light cannot shine on itself. So my mind is always touching consciousness, and yet it is troubled because it does not feel that. Just like being the toll keeper at the city gates, it can only come to the edge. It cannot cross over the threshold. It cannot become still. Therefore, only solution is your grace, Lord, because I obviously cannot do it myself. I've thought about it a long time, thinking is not helping. So show me how you can become me. Meaning, how can that image that I worship in front as the linga, as the image, show how that image can become revealed as my own self, that both the images can disappear and the self can be one. This is the beauty of this poetry. And I'm sure part of you are also thinking, why does she have to talk? Why can't I just sit with the poem? Because we don't even need that explanation sometimes. We feel the vibration of truth when we hear it, and that is because we are that truth. So these are just a few thoughts on the beauty of Akka Mahadevi, on the beauty of these saints and sages, and feeling that there is no need to go outside. Let us read about these stories. Let us revel in these things. Then our mind goes to those type of thoughts. Our mind also revels in the reveling of the saint or sage when we read their work, when we reflect on their life. So thank you so much for this opportunity to read about these beautiful saints and to celebrate their unique expression through their womanhood. It is very much such a great joy, and it makes all of us happy. So thank you again. Hari Om.
Thank you so much, Akalka ji. That was beautiful and inspiring poetry to listen to. We will now open up the floor for some questions. As mentioned, please direct your questions to me on Zoom chat. I received one question already, so I'm going to start by reading that out. And any other questions anyone has, please direct them to me on Zoom chat. Question 1, Shubhani ji or Akalka ji, is how do we plan for the future and make worldly decisions with a pure mind?
Akalka, do you want to go?
Sure. Okay. So how can we plan for the future? And just repeat the last part again.
How can we plan for the future, make worldly decisions with a pure mind?
Okay. So often the only solution is satsang. The thing is, we always want some kind of fancy explanation, but sometimes the simplest, most straightforward explanation is the most helpful one. Always be in satsang. All of the saints and sages tell us so. The scriptures tell us so. Everything that you read, somewhere there will be a line. Keep the mind at satsang. Swadhyaya and Pravachana na pramaditavyam. It comes in Gita. Vedo nityam adhiyatam. Always be studying. Always be in self-study, self-reflection, even if it's just to read one page of Gita in the morning, one page of some poetry, something that inspires us. Then what happens is our mind is already kind of in a certain mode by the time it approaches the problems or situations in life. What happens is we're usually already in a worldly mode, and then we try to come into spirituality. And that is a lot tougher, because what happens is worldly aims, worldly goals tend to be about how to promote the ego, and spirituality is really about removing the ego to make the transition, to make the harmony smoother. And when you come from ego into that spirituality, there's a clash. But again, paradox is being true. The less you have of ego, the more successful you are at navigating the challenges of everyday life, getting better in work, getting better in home life, precisely because there's less of the problems of the ego that you're bringing into those situations. So it's not that our spiritual life should make us less capable of living our day-to-day life, but we need to prioritize it and make that time even if it's just one page. Puja Gurudev in his books used to, in his little foreword or signature, that's what I meant to say, he would often say, 2 verses of Gita a day is the cure or is the prescription for a happy life. That's all we need.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question we have is, not all of us can be Anandamayi. The women saints we have seen have left the family life we know of behind to seek the Lord. How can we women in ordinary routines of mother, wife, caregiver, and provider actually grow spiritually?
I think that was Anandamayima, right? So yes, it's true. Not all of us can be Anandamayima, but we have family life and we can't lead family life. So how does a woman grow spiritually in family life? So the first thing is that family life is not separate from spiritual life. We tend to make this mistake and say, this is my family life, this is my work life, this is my spiritual life. There is no separation. Spiritual life is life. The first point is spiritual life is life. That's the first point of growth, is to have this vision that this is what my life is about. My life is about the realization of truth, and this is it. And therefore, everything that I do should be connected to it. That's point number 1. Point number 2, now I might feel like maybe taking care of my children, maybe doing my work, maybe running my errands. How is that spiritual life? It is. In Sanatana Dharma, we don't have a prayer hour or a prayer day, because in the Bhagavad Gita it is said that everything is a prayer. Bhagavan Sri Krishna clearly says, whatever we do, just offer it to Bhagavan, and that in itself is prayer. So there's no need to feel like I'm disconnected to God. There's never a disconnect from God if we see everything as connecting to God. So taking care of children is also connecting to God. Cooking, cleaning, it's also connecting to God. Running errands is also connecting to God. If we do it with the spirit that this action is purifying my mind, that's how it's connecting me to God. When we raise children, how many virtues come to a mother that raises children? Lots of endurance, lots of patience, lots of sacrifice, lots of fortitude. How many virtues come to a wife in a family who has to make all kinds of adjustments? Flexibility and acceptance, accommodativeness, because you never know who's going to come. Now, all of these virtues are nothing but what we call sadhana chatushtaya. They're nothing but the fourfold qualities which every seeker needs to pursue the path of truth. So if I see every little bit of my life as a connection to God, then there's never a question of how do I grow spiritually, because every single action is spiritual.
I think that answers the other question of how I remember God all the time in the midst of worldly responsibilities. But Shubhani, if you want to add anything to that, you can, but I think that perfectly answers the question. The other question is, how do I keep myself from the external distractors for the time I'm working? The 8 hours of work is enough to throw me out and bring mind back to peace.
So is this a question about distractions during our 8 hours or before, after?
I think during.
Yeah. So keeping our mind on our work, first, the important thing to remember is it's not easy. Sometimes we get discouraged because we try once or twice and then because it is hard, we want to kind of give up, But one thing to remember is, I read once that if your mind is like a puppy, if you have a puppy, if you've ever seen them, when they're first very young and you want to train that little one, right? Their natural inclination is to bite everything, to run everywhere, to get them to sit still and listen to the command. Very tough. So also when our mind has been used to doing whatever it has wanted to do, go in any direction it wishes, when we first start to give some discipline to it, put some spiritual disciplines, it will be tough. And first thing is to remember that bringing the mind back to calmness, bringing the mind back to concentration. One is, it is a practice. It is not always easy, but doing it with a loving attitude, just as you would if you were training, your darling pet or something. In the same way, there should be a very loving nature applied to even how we interact with our mind. So if we're at work, and especially when we do have free time, doing practices such as daily small puja, even if it's just 5 steps, doing a daily prayer in the morning, or lighting the lamp at Sandhya Vandan time, simple chant, some regular spiritual practice when there's low stakes, meaning when you have that time, you've carved out that time for this, it helps give a lot of strength and discipline to the mind at other times when it's harder, like at work and these kind of things. And probably one of the best is Japa. Even if it's Likita Japa, meaning written Japa, or if it's chanting with your Japa Mala, these regular practices bring so much concentration. Then when that muscle has, just like if you're lifting weights, as the muscle gets stronger, it gets easier.
I think that perfectly also answers the other question, which is, how do I remember God all the time in the midst of worldly responsibilities? And whatever you said about japa, I think fits perfectly. A continuation of that same question is, what, according to you, does the pure mind actually feel like?
Me, okay. This is a good question. If I'm at 100%, I'm sure I'll have a better answer. But I think that if the mind is a pure mind, the question won't arise. So when the questions don't arise, at that point, we're good to go. We're probably in a very good place at that time. But another way to think of it is to sometimes don't think about what it will look like someday in the future, but rather, why don't we think about the last time we felt truly happy after a satsang, or truly content when some big problem, we thought we had it, and then when it disappears, for that shining moment, we have some great contentment. Like one time I thought I had lost the keys. I was searching everywhere. Then when I found it, the amount of peace that I felt was quite great. So when we reflect on moments like that, imagine that for all the time. So these are hints, and we have felt it. The question is, because it is so fleeting, it feels, as though it never happened, like a dream. But we can be in that state all the time instead of it being like a dream for us.
Thank you. One more question. How can we balance using labels to inspire us, like holding closely identity as a woman and feeling inspired when we read about women saints, but not getting stuck in these labels?
So the first thing is, we have to see ourselves as a character. So yes, we are in a body of a woman or a man, a face of a woman or a man, certain religion, certain gender, any race, any culture. That forms our character. So when we separate ourselves and see ourselves as a character, then we don't get carried away. And we just know that this Shubhani is the character of a woman, and she plays the role of a brahmacharini, and that's what she does. And so she'll, there are certain things that she has to do, and that's how it goes. But that is a character. So for that character, this is required, that's required, all of that's required. But at the end of the day, it's just a character. So always see oneself as just a character, playing a role. And when the role's over, the character goes. That's it.
Wonderful. Just one, I guess, final logistical question. What books would you recommend to start the study of women saints?
Could you want to take that? Okay, our book. Our book, which is going to come out. No, I'm just kidding. We are working on a book on women saints, but I'm going to tell you a few books which I think are really good. I think Advaita Ashrama has a book, Great Women of Bharat. Swami Shivananda's ashrama has Women and the Ideal of Purity. And I would also recommend, saints like Anandamayima. Definitely, you can look her up. I don't have it with me. There's a beautiful book about her. And Akka Mahadevi, like Akalka ji said, she has written some nice vachanas, the vachanas of Bhagavan Shiva. So that's also really, really inspiring to read. So one can start there. In the Great Women of Bharat and in the Women, the Ideal of Purity, you can get a range of different women, and then whomever you pick, you can go deeper and study them. But as I mentioned, we're also going to work on a book so that we will all have a greater awareness of who these women saints are.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shubhani ji, and thank you everybody for your wonderful questions. I will hand it back to Shubhani ji to share some details about the book project that she just discussed.
Thank you, Neetu. Yeah. Yes, Akalka ji?
Oh, I was just going to say you were muted. All good.
Okay. So I think we'll just share some slides to give everyone an overview. Then what we will do, we'll close with a dune after this, and then people who are more interested to get more information, I'll go into a little bit more detail for those people. For now, I'll just give an overview. Kalkaji and I will go ahead and do that. So we're launching a book. First of all, we invoke Bhagavan's grace and Puja Gurudev's blessings to publicly launch this project, this initiative. And this book is called The Woman Seeker, and it's by the Chinmaya Mission Devis. So it's by all of us put together. And then the next slide. So this book is really exploring the lives of countless Hindu women saints and sages that have walked the path to enlightenment, some of which we've discussed today. And so who is this book for? So it's intended to be a youthful and joyous exploration. So it's not going to be like a textbook type, but it's a joyous exploration, and it's for people of all ages, all genders and backgrounds. And as I mentioned when I was speaking earlier, it's really to create an awareness about women saints. So that's the Shravana part, and to reflect deeply on their lives and draw inspiration from their teachings. That's the Manana part. And to transform, hopefully, as they have, from a seeker into the sought. That's the Nididhyasana part. And we go to next. So we anticipate this book really taking shape, by the summer, hopefully. And we're open to volunteers. So whoever's interested, you can stay back. And how will this work? It will work with grace. That's the only way everything works. Because we have no idea what we're doing, but we're not doing. Okay, next slide. So those who are interested in contributing to this project, when, we will send an email after this with a Google form. And then I think Akalkaji, if you want to just share a few thoughts about the Google form.
Sure. So at this URL, you'll be able to access the Seva interest list. That way, if you are not able to stay after for 10 minutes to hear more, you can still go ahead and indicate. So in the form, it gives some information about what is the purpose of the form. It's really just to gauge interest, and also it has a list of different things with which you can help. So there is going to be a writing portion, there's going to be an editing portion, and then there's also going to be more artistic contributions, so poetry, paintings, literary work that can also be included. And then at the end, of course, there's all of the administrative back-end support or sponsorship. So whichever way, if you are inspired to contribute to this project in some way, please do indicate your interest. Of course, we cannot guarantee that everything that is submitted, it will be possible to use, but of course, we would encourage everyone to, let us know if you are interested. And we do already have a number of Devis who are working on it. Some more brahmacharinis in the mission. They are also helping. This is really a collaborative project, and we're very excited. Please do visit the URL. It has all the information.
Great. Thank you, Shubhani ji and Akalka ji. I think we can now hand it off to Sapna Setukari, coordinator of the National Young Devi Group, for a dhun, followed by 2 minutes of silence.
काली कृपालिनी जगदोद्धारिणी काली कृपालिनी जगदोद्धारिणी निरंजनी नारायणी मां निरंजनी नारायणी मां काली कृपालिनी जगदोद्धारिणी निरंजनी नारायणी मां त्रिभुवन पोषिणी शंकर तोषिणी त्रिभुवन पोषिणी शंकर तोषिणी जन जन रंजनी जय जय मां जन जन रंजनी जय जय मां दुर्गे नंदिनी आनंद रूपिणी जगशीवनी मनमोहिनी मां दुर्गे नंदिनी आनंद रूपिणी जगशीवनी मनमोहिनी मां त्रिभुवन पोषिणी शंकर तोषिणी जन जन रंजनी जय जय मां काली कृपालिनी जगदोद्धारिणी निरंजनी नारायणी मां काली कृपालिनी जगदोद्धारिणी निरंजनी नारायणी मां देवियो 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 देवियो
That was absolutely divine, Sapna. Thank you. If anyone would like to be a part of the Devi group, please stay tuned for an email with some additional information after the program. And you can always also check the Chinmaya Mission West website for more details. Shubhani ji, is there anything else that you might like to add?
Just those who would like to learn more about the project, please stay back. And after the closing prayer, we will go over it. So again, we thank everybody for coming and for giving us this opportunity. And we're glad that everybody could come today. I'll just say the closing prayer. Om. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hari Om, everyone. And may Devi bless us with lots of virtues and knowledge to attain her. Hari Om.
I'd just like to quickly add, if anyone would like to learn more about their activities in their areas, if you would like to get involved with your local mission center, please do reach out or go to the Chinmaya Mission West website, which has all of the information there, along with the Devi programs, all these kind of things. Thank you.
Okay, so I think now we'll start with the presentation to go over those who want to volunteer, and volunteering is open to anybody, any gender. The writers will be mainly Devis, but the researchers, editors, anybody can help. So this is what we're looking for. We are going to take on about maybe 18 to 21 women saints from all over Bharat and out of Bharat also, those in the tradition of Sanatana Dharma. And we're looking for people to do extensive research and write about the saint. So the most important thing about this project is quality. The quality has to be exemplary, because we see this as a book that will go out to various institutions, schools, and but at the same time be so playful and engaging for any individual. We're also looking for people to contribute Devi-inspired pictures and paintings and quotes, and we'll show you samples of what these look like. And someone to help create digital illustrations of the Devis so that we can have their pictures on the book. The next slide. We're also looking for volunteers to work on editing essays, verifying factual information, checking references, because every single article or essay that's submitted will have to go through at least 3 or 4 rounds of checking. Someone to work on overall editing or Indian regional language expertise. Sometimes we might not know a certain language, so we won't be able to do a diligent job in checking it. And also editing diacritical marks in Sanskritam. So we're going to make sure that everything has diacritical marks, everything that is a Devanagari word. And next. So we also have some administrative things that people can do, either transcribe talks or topics related to Devi saints. We can also have people sponsor the book. Of course, we don't know yet how much it's going to be, but we're lining up a group of sponsors already, so that when we're ready to publish, we have the volunteers required. And also we have some back end and administrative tasks that need to be done, like a lot of following up and connecting with people. So the next slide. So what do the writing pieces look like? So as we said, the title is Woman Seeker, and to inspire women to seek the higher by showing them actual examples. So many people ask, oh, who are these women saints? And can you give us examples? Can you get us a book? So this is going to be, one of these books. And definitely the books that I've shared with you, the one of Shivananda Ashram and Advaita Ashram are really good books. This is our humble attempt from Chinmaya Mission to produce something also of outstanding quality with everybody's help, of course. Format is going to be the brief history of the saint or heroine, the teaching highlights, and why someone chose that saint to reflect upon. So we're calling this, someone might ask, why is it called The Woman Seeker if it's a book on saints? It's because it's also our connection with those saints. It's also why we're studying those saints and what we get from their lives. That's what we want to bring out so that we can also transform. As I mentioned, this is a transformative experience for all of us. Okay, next. So in addition, in between the saints or in and through the book, we would love for artistic contributions like paintings and poetry and quotes and reflection pieces. So we want it to look like a very nice and colorful book. So here's samples of what the writing's like. So this is a particular essay that was done on Andal. It's very nicely done. And so the writing work will look like something like this. This is just a paragraph, but we'll need people to check those words that are encircled, if they are correct, if they're pronounced, if the diacritical marks are right. Some words here are in Tamil, so we need to know how to do the diacritical marks in Tamil, how to show that so that it's correct. So these are various things that we need to look at. And we also need to look at the readability and the essence, the sentence, the spelling, the grammar. So this is really the writing and the editing. So it's a lot of research, checking references, spelling, etc. This is the writing and editing part. And of course, we're going to make sure that all the our essays have references, have due diligence references. So we need people to make sure that the references are formatted in a certain way, because we will have them at the back of the book. And the idea is we can't capture due diligence to that saint's life in the book because we'll just do an excerpt, but we would love to encourage people to read more. And so we want to give them a proper source, not Wikipedia, to read more about the saints. Okay, these are some art pieces. As Akalka ji mentioned, we've already started the project, and with some devis that we know. So these are some nice art pieces that they've submitted. So we're just taking all kinds of submissions, and we're going to select which ones can flow with the book. But this is so you have an idea of what's happening. And then, of course, there's going to be quotes and sayings in and through the book. So we know someone who collects subhashitas. So we requested her to send us subhashitas about Devi. So like that, we're also taking in quotes and sayings from scriptures or other references. We're also looking at someone to create digital illustrations. So as I said, we want this book to have a very young feel, though it's going to be applicable to all ages. So we're looking for kind of illustrations like this, that can bring Akka Mahadevi to a nice digital saint that we can connect to today's day and age. Go to next. And when I was saying transcribing talks, we have a lot of our Swamins or our Chinmaya Vishwa Vidyapith, they've also done some nice talks. So we would need someone to transcribe these talks so that we can possibly use that material for the book, in certain places. There's definitely going to be a section on women in Ramayana, epic women like that. So we would need the details of those talks. And of course, lots of help in the back end. So, this project's only possible with lots of coordination, following up, getting in touch with people, So this is also required, and the administrative tasks will become clearer to us as we move in the project. I think this is the first time that we are taking something like this on, of this magnitude. So we are also still learning. So please bear with us. And of course, as I said, to sponsor the book. So if anyone is interested, we are going to line up those list of sponsors already now. And when we're ready to print, we'll be set. So these are this is the vision of the project. I'll just ask Akalka ji, if you want to share anything or add anything.
Shubhani ji, I think everything has been covered, and just that even if it's whatever simple thing that you feel is within your wheelhouse that you would also be interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out and to fill out the form. There are so many small ways in which we can contribute, and even getting a chance to transcribe talks. These are also mainly ways for us to do sadhana for our own development. Even just in the little while that we've been talking and reading, I know we've personally gained so much from this study. And one thing, as Shubhani ji said, is if we want more material like this for women, celebrating all of the unique contributions, and our tradition has so many. I think that is one of the ways in which we feel that there aren't, but there are so many. We just started with a small list, and in a little while, Shubhani ji was sending, oh, have you heard of this saint? And I was, no, I have not heard yet. They're from all over India, in other places as well. So definitely, please do reach out, get involved, and hopefully enjoy.
There's one question here. Will there be more than one version of this book? No, just one version of the book. It will be written in such a way that it will speak to everyone, because the saint speaks to everyone. But it's just going to be presented in a very fun way, but it's going to be very, very professional, hopefully good quality book. Do you envision a hard copy and a digital version? I think yes, definitely a hard copy is what we're aiming for. And then we have to figure out when, how to release it digitally. But definitely a hard copy is what we're going for, because we think it's going to be a great reference for anybody really to have in their homes. What ages will the book be written to? 18 and above. So Akalka ji, does this sound about right? Can you? Yeah.
Is it 18 and above as in writing or reading?
It says what ages the book will be, as in writing.
As in those who are allowed to participate?
So Katyayani ji, maybe if you could just chat with me and tell me, are you asking about the writers of the book or about the readers of the book? Oh, the language of the book, the language of the material. Okay.
So that was something, when we were speaking, we were thinking it should have a youthful tone, and yet at the same time be accessible for people of any age should be able to enjoy it. Obviously not the very, very young, but probably high school and above should be able to easily grasp the material, and it should not be so academic that it becomes a little dry. This is the tone that we're going for, I think.
Please also consider an audiobook. Okay. Yeah. Yes. If we have enough help, why not? Yeah. Okay. So I guess at this point, if anyone has questions about the book, please type it to Neetu on chat. We'll take questions about the book. And then if there are no questions, we can close. Can one select any woman saint and do research on her? Do we have to get approval from Chinmaya Mission? So our Devi group already has written about some saints. So we have those write-ups. So before you take up a saint, make sure you get in touch with us, fill out the form, and then we will tell you, okay, these are the saints that we have in the list. And if that particular saint is not on the list, that's also okay. That's totally okay. We can add It might be somebody we don't know. But we are doing saints who have passed on. So nobody's who's alive. So saints who have passed on. Akalka ji.
And I'll just add that I've added in the form one question that is open-ended, which says, I would like to specifically contribute, or this has not been included on the list. So there is a long answer that you can put in. So if there's a particular saint that you are interested in, you can indicate that on the form as well. And then, as Shubhani ji said, we will be in touch.
Yeah. Okay.
No
Any
question.
thought? Yeah.
No questions so far.
Oh, no questions so far. Okay. So anybody else?
If you have any questions, you can put that on in that same answer portion. So in the form.
Okay. So I guess if there are no more questions, I think we will say Hari Om to everyone. So we'll send you the email with the forms. Those Devis who've already written, or your writing is with us, we're going through it one by one. So we'll get back to you with lots of feedback. And thank you to all of you. And Akalka ji, anything else? Okay. So Hari Om, everybody, and then maybe we can have the team, just the team, stay back. Hari Om, everyone else. Oh, wonderful, Renuka ji. Okay.